place them in you may place them in a chat, and also we will have some survey, and hopefully we will have today nice interaction with the participants and I would like to ask you to participate, because it is important not just to see how much you understood and at what level we are here with this topic, but also to see how to improve the next workshops. So it's as you can see from the agenda, there are like 4 main topics, themes that will be presented, and after each we will have a slot for questions and answers. And finally, to present myself, I'm Tijana Nikolić-Lugonja. I work as a researcher at Biosense Institute, and Biosense is coordinating this SONATA project. And as you can see, our hosts are colleagues from University of Oviedo, and the University of Oviedo is covering within SONATA this interplay between fundamental science and applied research. And recently they prepared this framework for in-situ data collection and its connection with habitat type modeling. So also, if there is something I just wanted to see, we will use Menti. So you will find this link in a chat, and hope we will have the very productive work today. Let's start with a short SONATA project. Let me see. Okay, with the SONATA project overview. For those who are not familiar with, SONATA is Horizon project, and it's part of Twinning Colg. We won this together with our partners on the topic of Green Deal. It was quite competitive, and only 20 projects are successfully supported by European Commission, and the success rate for this was 11.5. So a project started on the 1st of September this year, and we do have organized it in 6 work packages, and the Videra call proposition are that widening country, which is in this case Serbia, have to work with top institution from EU and boost capacity within the topic they are trying to develop in their own country. And luckily, we had this chance to work on proposal prep with Vito from Belgium, and Vito is our partner. It's an independent research and technology organization, and working in a clean tech and sustainable development, developing solution in this societal changing environment. The second partner is Nina from Norway. It's a leading institution for applied ecology. The third one is FIAC from Spain, it's a joint research center who is assessing this relationship between human activities and ecosystems. And finally, our host of today, University of Oviedo, that for which I said that they cover this interplay between fundamental and applied ecology. And the whole project is organized within these three main components. You can see the graph on the right side. It's inform, involve, and engage. And we are now in this inform phase in which our partners will inform us and get us to structure help us to structure our work, to prepare for the next phase, which is involved, in which we will work together with them. And finally, in the last year, or the last part of the last year, we believe that we will be fully engaged to conduct the work by ourselves. And let's say like the main goal is to strengthen our research and technological capacity, to boost administrative and management skills within the Bioscience Institute, but also to work with stakeholders from the beginning. Like the fact is that any societal problems should be solved together with the stakeholders. So in Sonata, we will address our stakeholders from the very beginning. And today, this is like the first of public, presentation of this. And the background idea to prepare this project was that we wanted to be recognized in monitoring, mapping, and modeling nature infrastructure. And since we are all committed to meet biodiversity and climate targets, to reaching sustainable development, and to halt the climate and biodiversity crisis. For all that, we need to know where are our habitat types, for example, and what is their distribution. I mean, extent and quantity, but also we need to learn more about the states and condition, and to prepare ourselves for overall landscape optimization. So basically, we would like to integrate this nature-based solution into nature resource management framework, which represents a promising cost-effective way to solve part of the problem that is provoked by the climate crisis we are facing. And it's not just that Biosense will who will structure and lead this work, but we also need people from other institutions in Serbia to work with us together. And by getting this training, we will also be able to train the others on the way in a few years. So but the thing is that the one of the main idea is also to make this setup for green data availability, in which we will provide service to other researchers to use the outputs we will get from the Sonata for their research to improve the work they already conducting. Strategically planned landscape optimization is the goal we are having. And Sonata have these 4 objectives on the left, but we are today addressing these ecosystem patterning processes, for which we would like to understand more and to learn more, to boost our scientific and technological capacities within this framework. And we will do it through creating detailed habitat maps in the Vojvodina landscape, which is intensively used landscape. And we will integrate and involve stakeholders within this process. And as I said, these stakeholders, today we are communicating with the scientific community, environmental practitioners who we invited to this workshop. But beside, we will work with public institution as well as with farmer and businesses, NGO, and the public. And since we are talking here about land use and landscape optimization, all stakeholders will come from these four land use sector segments. So from agriculture, forestry, nature conservation, and land-based energy. Those are like the main interest group for us. The key messages that we would like to communicate throughout the lifespan of this project. The first one, which are tackling now, is that nature-based solution planning require maps of natural infrastructure. I mean, I'm saying that there are a lot of people already working within nature-based solution framework, but here we would like to quantify everything that we know that is present, but it's not digitalized, it's not present, it's not in a form that can be used for strategic planning. So the other key messages are listed here will be addressed through other workshops. So the key exploitation SONATA output that is working with this first objective is habitat type based map. And this habitat type based map, the final one, will be produced in the last year of the project. We will upload it. It will be available through existing Biosense platform, AgroSense or EcoSense. So research community as well and decision maker will be able to download it and to use it for their needs with the condition to cite the paper that will be published and to just enter some query so we can follow who is downloading the files and so on. But that's what I said, like to develop this ecosystem with the field, with the green data that will boost not just bios, but also scientific community working within area to develop and further the research they have. So the first workshop and the first part of the first workshop is in-situ habitat data and collection, data collection and processing. And the main goal of this workshop is to promote understanding of habitat mapping. And for this today, we have our colleagues from University of Oviedo. The first one is Borja, who is a professor at university and he's leading this biodiversity, vegetation and biodiversity lab, and his interest goes from seed ecology, plant diversity and conservation to ecosystem mapping and biogeography. He is very successful in combining this in-situ data with habitat type mapping. With him today is Jose Manuel Alvarez Martinez, and he's a senior researcher at the Biodiversity Institute, and he's leading ecosystem mapping and modeling research at this lab, and his main interests go from ecological niche and species distribution to large-scale habitat type mapping and monitoring, as well as assessments of ecosystem structures, patterns, functions, services, and he is also very indulged in green-blue infrastructure for landscape conservation and restoration. So I believe that Borja is our first speaker, and I can hand over to you. The floor is yours, and just short, Borja, are we there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't say your your full name, Borja Jimenez Alfaro. I just didn't
Don't worry.
recall it, and I couldn't find, like, is there any paper that I can read your full name? But sorry. Okay, so Borja Jimenez Alfaro will be our first speaker, and as soon as I stop sharing my screen, just let me, you may start, but okay. Did I stop sharing? No.
I'm sharing now, but I'm not sure if you can see
No.
my presentation.
You
Okay.
have in the presentation mode, Borja, not the full screen.
Sorry?
Maybe
No.
you have not the full screen. You have the presentation mode with the next slide to the right.
No,
You
he
have...
cannot. Okay, I'm
Yeah, I'm
stop sharing.
presenting.
Here you are.
I can
Okay.
try again.
But okay. So
It's okay? Can you see my presentation?
yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Tiana, and hello, everyone. As Tiana said, we will, Jose and I will present this first in-situ workshop. And we have 4 sections today. This first one will take like around 30 minutes around. And the main aim now is to present the general problem and the general framework about habitat mapping and basically why we need in situ data and for what. So I understand that many of the attenders probably have different backgrounds and different expertise. So I think the presentation we have today is quite general, and in the following we will give more details and some um, practical guides and some documentation that you can use to go further. But first of all, what I would like now is to show you very generally, to explain you why we need in situ data within the framework of habitat mapping. When I say habitat mapping, it would be the same if I say ecosystem mapping. I don't know if you are aware, but habitat typologies is as you used to call this in Europe, but outside Europe, mostly in UK or the United States or Australia, they prefer to use ecosystem types, but basically we're talking about the same. It's just typologies or ecosystem or habitat that we want to map in the landscapes. So this is the agenda. I will present the general program and the framework, these first 2 points, and then Jose will continue with some specific case studies. And the problem is actually very easy to explain. It's just a long time problem or requirement that we need for mapping our landscapes and our um, protected areas or our countries or our regions or our continents. So since like decades already, there have been many initiatives for ecosystem mapping, and it's very much related to vegetation mapping. I'm actually a vegetation ecologist, so my main background is to I started mapping vegetation types, which with the time seems that this is very relevant, whether we want to map habitat types according to the European definitions that we will see later. So what's the difference between 20 years ago and now? The main difference is that now we have amazing technological tools that allow us to make much more powerful maps in terms of ecosystems and whatever. But we have all this technology, but at the same time, we have a challenge that's for using all this technology and the new AI or machine learning models, we need very good data to calibrate our models. And this is the main deficit that we can find now. There are many, many mapping initiatives around in the world now, in any country and any continent. And the main problem is that typically we are using legacy data. That means we are using localities or information, geospatial information that came from 20, 10, 30 years ago. And this is not good if we want to match this data with the remote sensing, the satellite data that we want to use for mapping. So the main change, I mean, there are 2 main points in the change of paradigm in ecosystem mapping. The first one is we have now very powerful satellite data. And the second one is that we need in situ data that we can link with that remote sensing tools. And that's what I'm basically explaining now. The theoretical framework came from something like this. So you can work basically at different spatial scales. You may want to map individuals in a forest. And for that, you need a grain, let's say, spatial resolution of vegetation. You need like very, very precise. Or you can just map regions and your extent is larger, and then your spatial scale differs. So basically, we want to map individuals. You need a spatial resolution at the meter resolution. But when you are going to map formations or land cover types, you typically, in the past, we are more flexible and you can use like 2, 3, 4 kilometer grid cells or whatever, like covering land cover, for example, is basically like a few hundred meters in most cases, but many times is averaged at 1 square kilometer. So what we need is something like that. We need something in between. We need maps that have very high resolution, like 20, 30 meters if we are using remote sensing. But what we are mapping on this scale is different community types or vegetation types. So it's good if we map forests, but we also want to differentiate conifers and deciduous forests. And within conifer forests, we want to differentiate like pine forest from abies or other like spruce forest, for example. And we want to do the same for shrublands, grasslands. So we want to go to high resolution level at high spatial level. And here is when we need to match the in situ data that we collect in the field to the remote sensing data that we will use for modeling. A few years ago, actually 10 years ago, in the European Environmental Agency asked to national, how is the name? It's a French institute that is not working anymore with EEA, but it was the Natural History Museum in Paris. And they prepared a very interesting document that you can find in the website. Is this one, Terrestrial Habitat Mapping in Europe. And basically, they collected all the information available about how vegetation or habitat mapping has been done in Europe. And they collected all case studies and they concluded what you can see here. So they said that for the future, it was in 2014, but it exactly applies to today. They said for the future, we need to optimize time and resources. We need more methodological consistency for habitat mapping. We need covering large scales with high resolution data, exactly what I explained in the previous slide, and something that can be replicable in time so we can monitor how ecosystems or habitats change. And very basic, very important is that we need ground truth data, something like GPS localities or something that is collected at the same precision if we want to make use of remote sensing data. And this requirement, this need is still valid today. Many mapping exercises are doing today without the resolution that is needed for spatial resolution and also the resolution of the in situ points in terms of the habitat units that were mapped. So how to do this? And the problem is that I'm coming from vegetation ecologists. So let's say people working in ecosystem mapping with a background in nature, habitat maps, phytosociology, if you want, nature conservation. And at the same time, there are other people that is coming from the remote sensing perspective that use other frameworks. They are very much based on technology, local studies, and normally they are used to map land cover classes like urban areas versus agricultural areas versus forest, for example. And these two worlds are typically quite isolated from each other. So what do we need is to make a convergence with these two worlds so we can use the best that the field biologists can provide from the field, together with the best technologies that remote sensing people can provide. And this is our main aim, and this is the main challenge that everyone has today. We want to make proper ecosystem or habitat mapping. So this framework is, I remember like 30, almost 25 years ago, when I started working as a biologist, I was doing vegetation mapping in the field. And it was something that was useful only for local management, maybe for vegetation ecologists. But now we have a very broad framework for which we can use all these ecosystem mapping, all initiatives about network-based solutions, the Green Deal in Europe, ecosystem accounting, ecosystem preservation, climate change mitigation, biodiversity conservation. So there are many, many aspects that will use ecosystem or habitat maps if we are able to produce them properly. And the framework continues with, like, let's say, scientific applied concepts. And the first one is this, that is called the area of occupancy. And this is a term that has been used for decades for species listing under the IUCN Red List. If you want to declare a species in threat of extinction, for example, whether a bird or a plant or whatever, and this is the most commonly term or metric that was used to describe the rarity of one species, the area of occupancy. And this is what is called criterion B for red listing. And a few years ago, this was applied to ecosystems as well. What it means that we want to know the range of ecosystem in the left of your screen. So that means how is the distribution of this ecosystem type or habitat type? What is the extent of occurrence? That means the real area that involves all the distribution of this habitat type. And finally, the area of occupancy, which means in which specific grid cells or spatial units we can find the ecosystem. And the standard metric of the IUCN is 1 square kilometer, which is quite broad. But what we need is to map ecosystems at a much higher spatial resolution rather than that. So we can use still the term of area of occupancy, but we need to go a higher resolution. And for that, together with Jose, we developed a conceptual framework a few years ago, in which we separated three main, or let's say two main parts of this mapping. In the first one is what we call the potential area of occupancy. And this is a metric that can say whether we can find or not a specific habitat in, let's say, 1 square kilometer. So we say potential because we say the climatic or topographic or edaphic conditions in this area around 1 square kilometer is good for one specific ecosystem, natural or semi-natural ecosystems mostly. And this is what we call the area of potential area of occupancy. But then we can include in these models remote sensing data from satellites or also LiDAR, and then we will be able to produce maps at much higher resolution. And at the end, we can detect the distribution or predict the distribution of this habitat at 10, 20, 30 meters according to the satellite data we are using. So the main principle is explained here. Imagine that you have a landscape like this. This is one traditional mountain landscape in northern Spain, where we live around, in the Cantabrian Mountains. And in the south of this area represents 1 square kilometer. So we can say that in this whole area, potentially we can find beech forests. And actually in the lower part of the image, you can see all this structure below the red line is a beech forest. But the beech forest is not occupying all the grid cell of 1 square kilometer. It's just in the lower parts, because in the upper part, there are oak forests and grasslands, which are different. So how we deal with that? just collecting in situ data. So we go to the fields. In this case is quite particular, just 1 square kilometer. You can collect data points from the field, from the landscape, these red dots you see in the screen. So each one of these data points will represent one of the different ecosystem types that we have here, either the beech forests or the grasslands or the shrublands or the other type of forest that we have in the upper part of the figure. And we need that at very good spatial accuracy. You can use a GPS around 10 to 20 meters of accuracy. We are actually using symmetric GPS to have a much better resolution now. And with this, if you collect this data and you give the correct information about what this point represents in the landscape, either oak forest, beech forest, or a grassland, for example, then we will be able to match this point with a remote sensing data, and we will be able to make a wonderful map of this area, separating precisely the different ecosystem types. And this principle is very easy to say, I recognize, but it's not that easy to do, because if you want to produce large scale maps, you need to collect many different of these red dots in the not in the landscape, but in a whole region, for example. So for that, we need to prepare or to develop good sampling strategies, which is something that we are going to mention later. So, and now I leave the word to Jose, and he will continue with specific case studies where we applied this framework. Jose? Stops.
Yeah, so thank you. I was muted.
Okay.
Okay. So can you share my screen here? It's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So as Borja stated, I will basically go and continue talking about what Borja explained theoretically using this case study. When we started working and on this need of habitat mapping, we started working in the north of Spain in this region, a small region called Cantabria, from which we had to develop the technical basis to provide like the technical basis for managing the Nature 2000 areas of the region to create that sexennial report. So for that, we need to go beyond the habitat mapping. We need to understand the distribution, the conservation status at the level of structure, function, trends, vulnerability of the habitat types present in the region. And the method that we start to work and to conceptually develop and then to apply is this habitat mapping that combines the field information and these spatial predictors through spatial modeling to get the best estimates that fulfill the requirements that we have to provide in this complex, dynamic, heterogeneous landscape. So as I explained, reporting or giving information to Nature 2000 is more than mapping land use land cover patterns. It's going into the details of that complexity of biodiversity patterns across the landscape that in turn are dynamic and managed by nature and human disturbances. So that patterns change on time and change the structure and function of ecosystems. So we have to deal with all of that. And the whole modeling process that will be treated after in another workshop with the colleagues of PITO in March, we put the focus on why this in situ data, as Borja explained, is important. So we have to go to the field and we have to collect that in situ information that will appear during the whole process of the modeling procedure. I am not going to go into details, but just to have this image, this simplified representation of what is a modeling procedure in habitat mapping. By putting to the left two different worlds. On the one hand, we have the collection, the occurrence data the reference in situ data that we collect in the field, that we put, as Borja explained, we couple to different nature of predictors. We put together with different algorithms to get the spatial predictions. And finally, by post-processing that spatial, that predictions, that models, we obtain maps that again need to be coupled with in-situ data, with occurrence data for validation or for again starting the process and getting better estimations and so on. So occurrence data appears through the whole process in the same way that appears when we work with species distribution modeling. Maybe some of you, if we talk about habitat mapping, some of you are not familiar with the concept of habitat mapping, ecosystem mapping, but you are with the species distribution models. So the concept is basically the same. We have occurrence data about the species. We have a modeling procedure that create predictions. We convert that predictions into maps that again need to be coupled with the occurrence data to validate our predictions. That's the general way we understand a modeling procedure, combining, as I told in this previous slide, occurrence data with predictors for getting estimations. It's the same that in species distribution models. But as Borja told, we have since many decades ago and more recently with the Sentinels with high temporal resolution, improved spatial and spectral resolution. We have satellite imagery, we have the remote sensing with LiDAR, drones, different type of sensors, medium resolution, very high resolution, a lot of opportunities to convert that potential distributions that the species distribution modeling is providing us into what we call local area of occupancy or local distributions. What actually is, what do we actually have in the landscape? Occurrence data, as I told, plays a role not only in the calibration and the training, but also in the validation and something more that we will see now. So occurrence data is playing a role during the whole process. For that reason, it's very important when we look through the window and we see a complex landscape, we see complex biodiversity patterns. It's very important that, as Borja will explain afterwards, that collection of reference data for many steps that basically will allow us to get reliable and better estimations. So with our models, what do we get with our models to see an image that is easier to understand? So what we see is reality, complex reality with a mosaic of forest, rapland, grassland, and the potential distribution, as Borja told in that pixel of 1 kilometer square. Potential distribution is mostly occupying the whole territory, but not only that, areas on which abiotic factors, on limiting factors, are not allowing the distribution of a type of a vegetation type. For example, forest will not occur over the altitudinal tree limit, or in this case, shrublands dry shrublands are not going to occur in humid areas close to river valleys. But when we include the remote sensing, following that framework that couples the abiotic limiting factors that we can see here, abiotic limiting factors plus remote sensing will reduce these potential distributions into something that is more reliable, something that occurs when we look through the window now. We can do this just for one map. We can do this for one habitat type. We can model the current distribution of dry heathlands that appears in this window, or we can put together with many other habitat types that compete across landscape continuum with these first habitat types that we can be modeled alone. When we put all together, what we obtain, following again the scheme, is a representation of reality, like a typical vegetation map on which each pixel of the territory that can be transferred into a polygon and so on, identifies the areas on which a particular habitat dominates against other habitats that compete in the landscape continuum. So let's put in a map. Imagine that we are mapping now the beech forest. So we can identify polygons on which we are going to find a beech forest, and we can identify within that polygon the areas on where the trees, the Fagus sylvatica tree, dominates against other habitat types and against other tree species. If we do this for all the habitat types, we can have a vegetation map, identifying polygons dominated by a particular habitat type, and we can include this information in tables and have the typical GIS on which we have for each polygon the amount of habitat that we have, the secondary habitats, and different indicators of the conservation status. As I told, we are not going to talk today about the modeling procedure. We want to talk that for getting this, it's necessary, as Borja explained, identify reliable occurrence data on the ground for proceeding afterwards with the modeling process. Once we have done the model, we have to validate our predictions. We have to keep independent data for validation, and we will get something like this, like confusion matrices, on which we know where we know which habitats are confunded, and we also know where that confusion occurred. So we can develop tools for improving that estimations. If we go to the field and we find a homogeneous landscape, it's almost sure that we are not going to fail. But when we have that complex landscapes, we have to know where and which habitats we are failing and where are that confusion occurring. And again, the role of occurrence data is very important to try to reduce that uncertainty and improve our estimations. And to finalize, one comment that I will go a little bit more in detail in the fourth section of the workshop. The role of raw data, not only in the validation, but also in managing the predictors. When we work with remote sensing, this is very, very, very good. Sorry. We have Landsat satellites from Middle East, we have Sentinel, we have different other sensors that we can include in our models. But one thing that we can see here to the right with remote sensing is the high variability of the surface reflectance or the spectral responses that we have on the ground. One issue that we have in many areas with remote sensing is related to topographic shadow. So all the images that you can see in these 4 squares in the upper left one, we can see the terrain, we can see the shadows. So collecting reference data is important for having information for all the habitat types, but also having information of the different let's say status or indicators of structure and function of the habitat types, but also, as the white arrow indicates, the same habitat type and also the same habitat type with the same conservation status can vary quite a lot in the spectral response it has because of, for example, topographic shadow. So we had one paper on which we work quite a lot on how in-situ data need to be collected and which is the role of in-situ data for ameliorating the effects of that problem, that topographic shadow of remote sensing when creating land use and cover maps or habitat maps. So imagine that you collect these points on the right, upper right side. These points are collected on the ground, as Borja explained, with GPS, high precision. And that points are recovering the whole biodiversity variability that we have on the territory. We also recover different conservation status of an habitat type for understanding how we can model one habitat type only using points with high quality in the conservation status, with ED members that are talking about the perfect habitat, or we can model that habitat with points with the whole variability of that habitat type on the territory. But if we are not accounting for the different spectral responses that we have with our satellite imagery for that habitat type, we will have troubles in our estimations. So we made all combinations, collecting millions of points, combining a large amount of factors and creating rarefaction curves for defining the amount of data we have to collect for each habitat type in these and these conditions. We will have problems unless training data is not collected through the whole variability of spectral responses. This was just an example that we have to make a very good job with in-situ data for training, for validation, and also that I will go in a little bit more detail at the end of the presentation by refining that data in relation to our predictors. If we take into account that 3 steps, calibration, validation, and the refinement of the in-situ data with the predictors, we can do, as we did with our colleagues of Peter and Europe, good or suitable habitat maps, even for large scale, always that we fulfill these 3 steps, and following, this is a spoiler, the next 2 sides of the workshop, that is having a classification, the child classification of habitat types that allows us to go through hierarchical modeling frameworks, collecting information in the field, and refining the information for allowing the occurrence data, the in-situ data, do a good job for us for having finally our maps and good results. So occurrence data is important for the whole process, and we know we have to know how to manage the information at every single step. And that's all from my side in this first slot of the workshop with the objective of highlighting the importance of occurrence data. So Tiana, Maya, if you want to run the slide or start the questions, then we will go in 3 steps. The 3 steps that I told now is classification system, collection of in-situ information, and then the refinement that will be treated in this workshop slightly, and with a colleague of Vito, Lori and colleagues and all, we will have another second side of this workshop to work in detail in this refinement, but step by step. So.
Okay, Maya, would you like to start with the...
Yes. Hello, everyone, from my side as well. I'm Maya. I also work at Biosense with Tiana on the SONATA project. We will just shortly go to Menti. I will share a link with you all in the chat for a few questions from us to you, and then I will open the next, let's say, few minutes for everyone to ask their questions to Jose and Borja. Okay? 1 second. Okay. The Menti link is in the chat. 2 short questions. Jose and Borja, are you happy with the results?
Yeah, it's important that everybody answer what he or she thinks is correct, but also to solve doubts here. That's we don't want to combine. We want to allow you to understand.
Good. Okay, there is one person that is not sure. Maybe later we can discuss.
Of course, we will have time for questions. Okay, so this was the first question, and I will go to the next one. Confirm that you can answer the question. Yes, okay. Okay.
So the questions can also have a gap, and maybe none of the answers can appear there. So if somebody thinks that something else can be done, yes, that's the room for the question afterwards, the discussion. And this question also is like and it's a how to say in English, catalizador, Borja, how to say? It's like uh, starting this question aims to start the next two sections of the workshop. So none of these sections are in the answers. So if you want to, from our review, if you want to start a vegetation monitoring task, first, you need to know what to monitor. So you need to know your environment. You need to know something about vegetation. What do I have there? I can download a map done by my sister. I love her, but she's a vet, so she doesn't know anything about vegetation. And on the other hand, you need to collect data. And that collection can be from available data sources, but can also be from scratch. If you know what you are looking for, maybe the best option is to go there and collect information about that. So it's just for discuss. Okay, it's good collecting information from remote sensing, collecting information from previous data sources, but first is what Borja is going to explain. You need to know what you are talking about. Otherwise, has no sense. What do you think, people?
If I can say something, yeah, I fully agree. But maybe because I actually didn't know what to pick here because my answer was not in the list. But I think that the first one could be considered as an exploratory start to looking at your area of interest if you cannot reach it directly yourself. So I guess it's maybe the most suitable answer here from my side, at least.
Yeah, I would like to just 20 seconds to explain what experience I had. I was working in a European project about dryness. Okay, in Europe, it's a gradient from southern Spain to the Baltics, to Norway and Sweden, and it was we spent a lot of time in Spain and France working with the vegetation classification to allow the hydrologists to parameterize the hydrological models about dryness. So we wanted to know when the leaves, when the trees lost the leaves, and working with LiDAR calibrating time series of remote sensing for understanding vegetation structure with sentinels by using the LiDAR information we have in Spain. So, and the results were very promising. We're in a workshop in Lyon, everything was perfect. And then we moved to Germany, Norway, and Sweden, and vegetation there has nothing to do with the Mediterranean vegetation. I know it, but I didn't realize clearly. So when we started running the models, it was, come on, for us having the summer dry was mandatory for our classification procedure. But there you have not the summer drying period, so you have nothing to do with our first idea. So I agree with you, Lori, of course, but it's very important to know what you are talking about. So if you don't know anything about the functionality of vegetation, you don't know anything about how the vegetation evolves through the whole year, and you don't know anything about disturbances, you are compromising your modeling effort, even though you have the best predictors and modeling capabilities and so on. So I agree that playing and explore is perfect. It's maybe can be the first step, but coupled to a knowledge of what things are going there when you look through the window. I like always talking about when you look through the window, do you understand what is going on? If that's your house, I know how my landscape in front of my window works because I've been 4 years looking at evolution on time. Yeah, so just opening the minds into the what's reality, what we can model, and how to couple both worlds.
Yeah, well, I do understand what you're saying because I think also the knowledge of the people that really live there and know you know the Cantabrian Mountains also so well, and I've seen them also in other projects. People can really indicate, yeah, but these grasslands have this kind of history, so they don't match with this UNIS classification or whatever. So that is always very important to take into account when you're trying to get a picture of the location that you're interested in, indeed.
Okay, thank you all. Do we have any questions for Jose or Borja at the moment from the audience?
I have one question, but I could not raise my hand. Can you raise your hand in the Zoom? I'm not sure. However, I have a question about what you showed about the topographic shadows, and that I think it's also very necessary that you need to cover enough.
I think so, but never mind. Just go ahead, please.
Okay, I think there's a delay with Maya, but so I think it's also important that you cover enough different spectral signatures and responses from your training points for one class. But I was wondering how the results were, because I'm not sure if that was also part of the Europabon project, what you showed. But however, how are the results? Because I can also imagine that if you have more responses that are maybe sampled in these topographic shadow regions, that it might also give some more similarity with different classes in certain categories. So how were the results?
Yeah, so that it is not in Europa Bond. It was we made this work when we started working in this habitat mapping thing, and we started struggling about, come on, the spectral response in Cantabrian Mountains, in other mountainous regions. The differences in northern and southern slopes are amazing. The good news in some places is that when you change the aspect, you change the vegetation type, because you can have beech forest in the northern slopes and oak forest, Quercus rotundifolia, and others in southern slopes, but not always. Sometimes you have the same vegetation type and you have different sun exposures in the image. So when the most straight approach is not correcting topographically, because the topographic correction is quite, it's complex. It modifies quite a lot the sun slopes also. So it's like a very aggressive change in the images. So one question was, is necessary to correct topographically, or we can avoid correcting topographically? And the easiest response that we found is that if our sampling scheme is complete, we have representativeness and completeness. Topographic shadow can be, I mean, that problem can be included in our back of problems. But if our sampling is biased, and we have, because when we contracted through Borja botanists, and they went mainly nearby the roads, so nothing to do about the slopes. They are nearby roads, usually in slope bias to southern slopes. So you have a big amount of pixels with no information at all about what is going on. And as you told, sometimes the same habitat type with different topographic shadow has a reflectance identical to other habitat type. So that was, I mean, it's not a clear message. It's complex, as you know, how managing all that interference of image corrections. But the clear message is, let's manage for being safer. Let's manage in-situ data to be complete and to be representative. I mean, cover the whole range of your study area in terms of extent, and covering all the variability in all the factors that will affect classification. So if you have an habitat type in different altitudes, sample in all the altitude ranges. If you have an habitat type in different slopes, take samples across slopes. And if you have also an habitat type in different reflectance, let's say, characteristics, and different topographic shadows, and you are not correcting topographically, be sure that at least you have some points in the different topographic shadows. And then, as you know much better than me, the magic of the technique and computational capabilities and artificial intelligence algorithms and machine learning will do their job. But at least you are feeding your algorithms with complete information. That's the idea, that it's not just important having reference data for mapping and for validation, but also for coupling, for understanding what is going on with our predictors. That's the message.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So, and I have one question. So, but and maybe it's related to the next session and this sampling scheme. So, do you you prepare sampling scheme based on the area which you are focused? For example, in Vojvodina, we will create our sampling scheme based on the info that we will jointly provide. But then also it is helpful. Like what I learned from by now is that like by running this preliminary map with AVA dataset, we will have opportunity. I'm also saying this for the others who are the new to this topic. We will be able to scale the effort that we are need to put into ground truthing and also into designing where to go and how to go. But then if it's more like here we have a intensive agricultural area, it's a flat landscape, and maybe there will be problems with differentiating between certain habitat types. Also, when you include the conditions that are currently very dry in the last few seasons. So how you know how much of how you know how to construct this sampling scheme and how to divide this area and how many number of training areas we should have, and what is some overview suggestion?
I think what you need first is a list of the habitat types that you know you have in the region, and you can get from previous maps or botanical knowledge or whatever. And then you simply need to cover the maximum number of habitat types and to cover them like in a sampling scheme that maximizes spatial representation. I mean, if you know you have some carpinus or beech forests, not just go to one site, but try to cover this habitat type, like sampling in different areas where you know this habitat may exist. It depends on the quality of the information you have. If you have very good information about where the habitats are represented according to previous maps, then you can make like in a different way. But if I will present later what we did in Turkey, and in Turkey we didn't have anything, we didn't know. So we created like some sampling scheme that you maximize natural areas just using coordinate land cover and natural or semi-natural areas, which is the key here. And so that means that we focused on natural areas and tried to avoid agricultural areas, just to maximize. So it depends very much on the previous information you have.
Yeah, one quick comment, yeah, and Borja. And for example, Borja, I mean, we earned an interesting project a couple of weeks ago just by applying what I'm going to tell now. So this kind of technique, that wall that Borja presented, that the traditional mapping and this remote sensing-based mapping is have a wall, but it should not have any wall because they are complementary. So the good news of this technique is that it's adaptive. So there is an optimal that Borja will explain now. So we can identify the optimal number of points, not just the maximum theoretical absurd waste of time and effort, but there is an optimal, but also you can adapt your time, your money, your effort to the available time, money, and effort. If you apply traditional mapping techniques, photo interpretation, and create your maps by drawing on a GIS, you cannot cover the whole Bolbodina region in 6 months or 3 months. But if you have 1,000 euro, 2 people, and 1 month to create a map, you can distribute your effort for 1 month, 2 people, and 1,000 euro. So, and you will have a map at the end. So putting more effort in the technological side, that is, let's say, quicker. So that's a very, very large opportunity of this work. It's adaptive. You have an optimal, but you can have what you can have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I believe we should continue with the following topic, sampling scheme for data collection. So
Sorry, Diana, we made a mistake in the agenda. I made a mistake when I sent you. Now is the classification. So Borja will proceed.
okay, now it's close. Oh, sorry, because I'm reading
Yes,
the one from
sorry,
yesterday.
my mistake.
Okay. Yeah, the one that I needed for reading the full name of Borja, but it wasn't there. Okay, sorry. So please go on.
Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yes, Borja.
Part 2? Okay. Okay, now this is part 2, UNIS classification and systems and crosswalks. The main point here is that for all of these, and I guess that for any similar exercise in Europe, we are following the habitat classification, which is called UNIS. Actually, UNIS, you know, is the European Information System, Nature Information System, and this European institution has a habitat classification that was developed many years ago, and it has been improved in the last years. And this is, let's say, the reference list of habitats, of all habitats in Europe. So we need to follow it. The classification of vegetation, habitats, or ecosystems is never perfect, but in the best, we can have something that is practical, and this is absolutely the case. So sometimes there are doubts about how to interpret one UNIS type or not. It's even worse for the Annex 1 habitat types, but we need to adapt to this classification. Of course, there could be exceptions sometimes how to interpret, or as I will explain later, it is useful to have regionalization of this classification. Okay, so we will see later in the practice we are going to do after this small talk. So what is UNIS or EUNIS? I can't. Yeah. And the first question is, what is habitat for the European Union? I said before that when we say habitat types in Europe, it's basically the same concept of ecosystem type in Australia or United States of America, for example. So there is a definition of habitat that you can find in the documentation of the European Nature Information System, UNIS. And it's something like that: plant and animal communities as the characterizing elements of the biotic environment, together with abiotic factors, soil, climate, water, and others operating together at a particular scale. And I would remark here plant communities, not only because I am a vegetation guy, but also because when you go to the landscape, in most cases, when you look and you try to identify one habitat, what you will see is plants. You will see plants forming vegetation, forest, heathland, a grass, whatever. And so in practice, even if we consider habitat type as the complex of all biotic and abiotic components, in practice, you will see that all habitats are primarily defined attending to vegetation because it's practical and because it's, let's say, the sustain of all the ecosystem. So that means that it's not conceptually, it's not just a group of trees if you are talking of a forest, but the habitat is the interpretation of a given forest type is trees that are forming some kind of communities because they are probably settled in a specific soil bedrock or specific edaphic conditions or climatic conditions. So all together is what makes something to be defined as a habitat in Europe. But it's the same for the definitions of ecosystem types in other countries. So what we have is this website, which is, would you see the link here, but did you put in your Google or whatever, like UNIS, you will find very easily this official website of the European Union, of the European Commission, where you will find all the information about European habitats. And we will have a look later in the practical session after this talk. But before, I would like to anticipate something that you will find in this website and to be clear how to differentiate the two main definitions of habitat types that you find in this website and also in all the documentation of European nature information system. And what you will find is like two major entries. One is about the UNIS habitat classification, and the other one is the Directive Annex 1 habitat types. And in both cases, you will find habitats which are named, and they are coded, and they are described. And many times they are referring to the same thing. So it's very important to differentiate exactly what is the difference between these two, because let's say that the first one, UNIS classification, is what you will need for making habitat maps. And the second one is what gives you information about the habitats which are protected and which are part of the Natura 2000 legal instruments for nature protections. So I will explain this now because I'm sorry, some of you that are already very familiar with this, probably would be nothing new, but these concepts are very important. I still find people also in the academia that miss these two concepts, and it's very important to have them clarified. So basically, the UNIS habitat classification is a complete list of habitats. It's like if you are working with these species, it's like something like a checklist of plants, vascular plants for Serbia, for example. It's the same, but for habitats. So it's something that refers to the whole list of habitats that you have in your region, in your country, or in Europe. This is the habitat classification, or habitat types. Independently whether they are common, they are rare, they are protected, or they are whatever. All habitat types should be, and actually they are represented in this list. And when you go to the Annex 1 habitats, here what you have is a description of specific habitat types that were selected, and they were defined as habitat of community interest. That means that they are protected by the European law and at the same time by any country that is part of Europe or it's part of Natura 2000, as will be the case of Serbia. So unfortunately, the description of these Annex 1 habitats is not exactly the same that the UNIS habitat classification, because the description of the protected habitats came first. And it was based on a preliminary list of habitats that I will explain later. So you need to interpret both of them, and you need to have the links. And if you go to the UNIS habitat classification and you identify one specific habitat type, you need to interpret whether this habitat type, the same concepts, is protected. That means that it's under Annex 1. And we will see later how to understand this in practice. Sometimes it's very easy, very clear, no problem at all, but other times it's more difficult and it's subjected to interpretation. That's why we need the regional and national interpretation of both actually UNIS and Annex 1 habitats. So to sum up, the habitat UNIS classification is a checklist of ecosystems or habitats. So you make a map, like you see here on the left. You should have everything covered, including urban areas, industrial areas, plantations. Everything should be covered because you will find one UNIS habitat type for that. But if you want to select those habitats that are protected so that you have legal instruments under the Natura 2000 framework, then only, it depends on the region, but just a few of them, not all of them will be selected because only some of them typically will be protected. This is kind of, I don't remember now, it's kind of mountain natural area, so you will see a lot of polygons which are protected. But if you are in like a huge agricultural area, you will find very few of them. So most of them will be habitats which are not protected. So let's go to UNIS first. The UNIS classification, how is done this classification? It intends to be based on science or rigorous identification of habitats, and it's also based on a hierarchical classification. That means that you can get the level that you have data or the level that you want or you need. But the Annex 1 is a legal instrument. So it's based, of course, on some knowledge, but it's not necessarily like very accurate. Sometimes it's very accurate, sometimes not, unfortunately. But you need to think that this is a legal instrument. It's not a scientific document. Of course, for some things, it's much more relevant because it means protection under the law. But this is like what we have right now. How EUNIS originated. So maybe some of you know about the Corin Biotopes Manual that was based in 1991. This was the origin of the Corin land use maps. And it was like the first list of habitats occurring in Europe. Then after that, in 1996, the Council of Europe made what it was called the Palearctic classification. It was something a bit more scientific, more detailed about the habitats occurring in Europe. And then in 1995, but it was developing for several years, is what we know now as the UNIS. Okay, and this is supposed to be much better defined. Mostly originally was based on botanical information and phytosociological units. So for phytosociologists, it is not that much detailed. For people who don't like phytosociology, they think it's fine in this way because it's just a description of dominant species or whatever. But the main point is that it's based on botanical knowledge mostly to identify or to describe these what we call the UNIS habitats. How these UNIS habitats are used. So for example, they were used to develop the Emerald network. Probably in Serbia, you are aware of this because this is the first, this was the first step to enlarge Natura 2000 in non-European Union countries. It is also, of course, it's the mandatory checklist for habitat mapping. If any country in Europe wants to develop a habitat map of any kind, you can use the legend that you want. But if you want to report it to the European Union will ask you to make a cross-link with UNIS habitat classification. So it's like kind of mandatory now. And also the UNIS is used for INSPIRE. You know about that. This is like a spatial infrastructure to identify land cover in Europe, high spatial resolution, and many other projects, initiatives like critical loads and other European initiatives, that many more now, like the Green Deal objectives and so on. But instead, the Annex 1 habitat typology is a legal instrument, and as I said, they were described in 1992 by the interpretation manual. So that's the main point, is that the Annex 1 habitat typology is quite old. At that time, there was not a good Corine Palearctic or UNIS habitat typology classification. So it was like based, it was done from scratch. I think sometime the European Union will need to update the description of these habitats. Probably it will be based on UNIS, but for the time being, what we have is the original interpretation or description of habitats. And now we have for the 28 countries forming the European Union. Now there are 27 after the Brexit. And what happens that new EU members like Serbia will need to revise the habitats and to adapt somehow the complete list for the country level, or to amend, to update a little bit the habitat Annex 1 if they feel that it's necessary to update or to include new habitats. Okay, I don't know, probably for Serbia it will not be the case. This will be the case for Turkey if they join the European Union one day, but for the moment it's quite unlikely. And so if you want description of the habitat types. The main reference list is this original interpretation manual from 1992, but as I explained, the original document has been updated with the amendments of new habitats for Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, Romania, and Croatia, and other countries, as far as they have been like part of the Natura 2000 network. So every country has a translation in national languages for this, and this translation is not only linguistic, but it must be also adaptation to the country characteristics. I mean, you accept you have the same habitat, but you can like update the description for your own country. For example, this is the emerald sites that were described in Serbia a few years ago. You see here with these green colors, they represent the emerald sites to join the Natura 2000, and I think that is now in progress. These emerald sites probably will become the Natura 2000 sites if they are not already part of Natura 2000 in Europe. So Serbia was part of this process of enlargement and amendments and adaptation of Natura 2000 habitats for Serbia. And yeah, so basically the main point here is something like this. So we have, for every country, we have scientific information, originally phytosociology, but in most cases is botanical information about habitat, species composition, dominant species for each habitat. And then we use this as a background to make the habitat classification. And if you are interested in Natura 2000, you should define or describe your habitat types, protected types that are part of Natura 2000 that originally were described with this botanical information, but also, and I think like preferently, you should look at your complete habitat classification for your country or your region, and then you can select those habitats that you have in the region that correspond to protected habitat types according to Natura 2000. So in the end, if you want to understand the habitat types that you have around, which is what we need for habitat mapping, we are basing habitat mapping in the UNIS habitat classification here in blue. What you need is to have botanical information to describe the habitats. And for that, we have a very nice document that was created a few years ago, and is this scientific publication that is a description of all UNIS habitat types for all Europe. So this was a joint effort of what is called the European Vegetation Survey. It's a group of vegetation ecologists from Europe. And we put together all the data in a big EVA database, European Vegetation Archive. And with this data, we were able to define rules floristic rules to define the habitat types, UNIS habitat types in Europe. We are talking about the UNIS classification, okay? Not the Annex 1. And this is very useful for understanding the concepts of every single habitat type in Europe. It is true that sometimes at the regional scale, it can happen that your habitat is quite the same, but not exactly. So that's why we recommend to continue with the UNIS habitat classification at level 4 at the regional level or national level. I will show you later. But this is like a document that is important. You will see, and also, yeah, we will see in the materials I shared with you later. And these documents, this thing, what includes is something that is called expert system. Okay, the expert system is an algorithm that is used to assign a vegetation plot or a vegetation inventory from the field to assigned to the unit's habitat at which corresponds. And this can be done automatically. So if you ask for vegetation plot data to EVA, to the European Vegetation Archive, they will return you the vegetation plots from your study area, and these plots will be assigned to a specific unit classification type. And this is automatically done using this expert system. And I repeat that this is very good to have an idea for the units classification level 1 or 2 or even 3, but sometimes you will find that it's not like matching 100% because you need to adapt a little bit to your study region. You can see this later. So an example, before going to the practice, to the documents, I will explain you the documents now, but before, imagine that you are in the field, whatever in Europe, and you are in a forest like this. This is a Fagus sylvatica, a beech forest, okay? And probably acid soils. And so the first that you need to imagine, you want a point for the modeling. You are here, you collect a GPS point. Okay, that's good, that's easy. But then what will be the label that will be behind this GPS point? You need to decide how you call this. Okay, I guess anyone will understand that this is a beech forest, so it's fine. You will find a group in the UNIS classification would say it's Fagus forest, but there are two groups actually. Fagus forest on acid soils or non-acid soils. And for that, you will need to interpret the companion species to identify the whole habitat. So which species? Okay, here there are not many species in the ground, but some of them. Okay, so you need to look at the shrubs, herbaceous species to identify, or you have soil data from the region to identify exactly what kind of habitat is this. And then this is the label that you will link to your GPS point. And then when you are doing the computations, your maps, whatever, at the end, you will be able also to connect this habitat type to what specific Annex 1 protected area it corresponds. Okay, this is the main idea, and I will show you now in practice with the practical part of this. So I will stop share. You have any question now? I mean, something very relevant question, we can reply now.
Borja, just shortly, we had a question in the chat from one of our non-biology and related fields colleagues. So
okay, yeah, exactly. This is what we were doing now. So we are doing exactly that. Okay, so I will show you in practice. I will start sharing now again. So yes.
Yeah, well, during Borja shares, just to think on what we discussed before. Imagine that you have soil information and you know you are in a beech forest, but what could happen if you run a model using soil information that is not good or accurate, that is like soil grids, for example. I don't want to say it's bad. It's not good for local scale. And you run a model and the soil is telling you acid soil, but actually you are not in a Fagus with acid soil. So think on what we told before. You have a coordinate and a Fagus, but the soil information is telling you this is not acid soils or vice versa. Think on what you are doing. You are increasing uncertainty. Just to use the comment of Borja on the acid soils. Okay, so two, the need of refining the in situ with any predictor you are going to include in your modeling.
Okay, can you see the Google page? Okay, so you go to UNIS habitats, you will find this. Okay, this is the main access to description of any habitat, and you see that the European Environmental Agency has this website And you can look for species, habitat types, sites of Natura 2000. So let's go to these habitat types. And here you have different options. Okay, you can see here, it will be bigger. Yeah. And you will see, for example, let's start with the habitat types of units. The first thing you will notice is that there are two links. That's what is because in 2 years ago, the UNIS habitat classification was reviewed. So it was thanks to this scientific publication that I mentioned. So initially, you should go here because it is the most updated version of the UNIS classification, okay? There are a few groups that are not yet included. If you are going to some specific wetlands, you should go to the oldest, but in the future, the main reference will be this one because it's simply like more updated. Okay, so and here, that's why I mentioned that this UNIS classification is hierarchical. So if you are interested in forests, you go to this group here, which is group T, forest and other woodland lands. If you are interested in specific types of grasslands or lands dominated by forbs, herbs, whatever, you should go to group R and so on. So let's try the T group. So you will find here that according to the UNIS classification, all forests are included at what we call level 1. That means the first level just to be a forest. But within the forest, we go to the level 2 and we can find 4 types of forests or woodlands. The first one is for the deciduous broadleaf forest. The second one is broadleaf evergreen forest that includes Mediterranean forests mostly. The third group for the coniferous forests, and then there is another group for like small patches, lines of trees. So everything in which any part where you have trees forming kind of forest of woodland will be represented here. If we go to something simple like the beech forests, you should go and you say, okay, a beech forest is a deciduous, right? Then I go to the level 2 T1 and you will go to the level 3. And now it starts being more interesting. Now you find here that there are 2, 4, 6, 8, around 20 types of deciduous broadleaf forests. And this is what we call the level 3 UNIS habitat, okay? So you see, okay, I'm interested in identifying the fagus forest, and you start to look, okay, these are riverine forests, no, Mediterranean riparian forest, broadleaf swamp forest, whatever. And we find here 2 types, a level 3, T17 and T18, which are called fagus forest. That means that they represent the beech forest, okay? And now you need to know whether you are on acid soils or not, because the species composition and the habitat type differs quite a lot. So you can go further to level 4, but in level 4, it starts to be more difficult and it is mostly based on regionalization. But I have to say that this level 4 is very heterogeneous across different habitat types. So what we recommend and what we are doing is to focus at the regional national level, level 3, and then we create our level 4 for our region to specify what we have in our region. So sometimes you can use something of this. There are even level 5 and it stops here, but sometimes it's difficult. So for beginners, I recommend to stop on level 3. And for those that need to create a habitat classification for your country or your region, my recommendation is to use vegetation data or your expert knowledge to define what you have, because it could happen that within fagus forest on acid soils, in our region in northern Spain, we have 2 types, and maybe in another region there is just 1 type, which are easy to recognize, or 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever. Okay. So what's next? Once you have identified your habitat type, for example, Fagus forest on acid soils, you can click here and you will have a description. This is the standard description. Forest dominated by beech, could be Fagus sylvatica or orientalis in Eastern Europe, on oligotrophic base, poor mineral soils, whatever. And you find here the general description. What it was the problem of the problem of this website, that some people would like to have a more specific description because it is not too much. If you are a botanist, you like to have more information. And that's where we can go to the results of this publication that I just mentioned. And I can show you, you have now in the you have a folder what is called practice in the link. And if you go to this folder, you don't need to go now, but just to show you where you will find it. In this part 2, you will find a folder which is called a Hitri et al. Is this scientific paper. And here you will find this PDF, which is just the appendix of the paper. And in this appendix, you will find a whole description for each habitat type, including the characteristic species, the constant species, and the dominant species. For example, let's go to this T18, which is the Fagus forest on acid soils. So I will look for T18. Yeah, here it is. And you will find that here is the description. And this is like very similar description to the UNIS website, Fagus forest on acid soils. You will find a map with the distribution of this forest according to the data we have in the European Vegetation Archive in this European dataset. You will have a correspondence to the phytosociological alliances, if you are familiar with this kind of information. And then you will find a list of the characteristic species. And there are 3 types of characteristic species. The first one is diagnostic. That means the species which are found probabilistically with higher probability here than in any other country. It can be called indicator species as well. That means species that tell you that you are likely more in this habitat type than in another one. You have then a list of constant species. That means the species which are more frequently found in this habitat, but in all Europe, okay? Please think always that this is made with European data. So sometimes for regional things, you may find species that maybe are not occurring in your region. Of course, Fagus sylvatica is a must for this, but that means that Avenella flexuosa, this like Acidophilus herb, is present in 56% of all plots of this habitat in Europe. And the same for Vaccinium myrtillus, this strongly acidophilous species as well, is found in 50% of this habitat type, of the records of this habitat type in Europe, and so on. And you have also like a list of the species which are dominant. That means the species which normally are like at local dominance higher than 25%. Okay, and you have all this information here in this appendix if you are interested to describe and you need something more than what is found in the UNIS website. But also in the same folder, you have an Excel file, which is also an appendix. And in this Excel file, you can you can have the same information, but you can just, you know, filter or find the same if you want to export to a database or whatever, you have the same information just as a raw data, okay? What else? Let's go back to the units types. Okay, the next thing that you will need to know, if you remember, is imagine that you say, okay, I'm now confident that the points that I'm collecting in the field represent these Fagus forest and acid soils, which are the T18. Now the question is this habitat type protected or not? And the units platform gives you something about that. If you go here to legal status, sometimes in vegetation types you have description of phytozoological units. It's not the case here. But if you go to legal status, then you will find which Annex 1 habitats related to this habitat type you can find. And here you have 4. That means that this code you have here, 9110, this is one Annex 1 habitat type, and it's called Luculophagetum beech forests. And you have another one which is called Atlantic acidophilus beech forest. So which one is corresponding to your specific site is something that you will need to check. Sometimes it's one-to-one automatically, but sometimes, as you see here, the habitat relationship is wider. That means that this habitat type could include not only this one, but other types that are not protected. And now you may say, okay, how this Luculophagetum beech forest is described, and you can click here, and it will give you the sheet for this habitat type. But here, what you have is the description of the Annex 1 habitat. So it's description of the protected habitats. And you will find that it's quite similar to the other one, but if you want really to know whether the habitat type that you have in your region and corresponds to this level 3 Fagus forest, you need to understand and to interpret this description, because this is the last key to know if the habitat is protected. And ideally, this must be at the national or even better regional level. So that means that if you create a list of habitats for Vojvodina, then because you know which habitats, with Fagus habitats you have in Vojvodina, then you can link specifically to this or to other, or it could be the case that some Fagus beech forest on acid soils are not protected because they don't correspond to this specific type. But it's something that you need experts to create these cross links. And just to finish, in the documentation that you have, you will find another folder that is called Unis Web. And here you have an Excel file that you can download from the Unis official website. It's a bit hidden, it's not easy to find, but I found for you, and you have here. And what you have is a list, a comprehensive list of all Unis habitat types. I'm going to forests. And for each one, you have the more likely links to the Annex 1 codes, okay? So this is very useful as a first overview. I repeat that the national or regional level, you will need to fix this because this is based on all Europe. Of course, it's not the same in all Europe. But I mean, the links are not the same because the habitats are homogeneously described. You go to this group we were talking about, this T18, Unis Fagus forest and acid soils, you will find that this could include the Annex 1 9110, but also the 9120, but also the 91 WO, and also the 9260. Okay, it could be linked to this or not, but it is something that you will need to specifically the first three, you will need to understand according to what kind of fungus, forest, and acid soil you have in your region. And for that, you will need to make a further description level 4 or a specific description in your region. Okay. I don't know if, I mean, you can play with that. You have the documentation and the shared folders. Okay. So this is the tools that you have. I hope you understood more or less what the main message here. Okay, and stopping sharing and we are done with this second part. We are going to the questions.
Yeah, so just shortly to clarify, the material that Borja was just now mentioned will be shared with all of you
Okay.
after we finish the workshop. Yes, everything will be available, and yeah, we will send the link to everyone, just so you know.
Okay.
And now, yes, if we have any questions, please go ahead. If you cannot raise your virtual hand, just unmute yourself and ask the question. Okay, so in that case, I will give you a few more minutes to think about that, but I also have a Menti for this section as well. So the link is coming to the chat. One second. Yep. Here it is.
Okay, I think it is winning the option of being aware of that, but never applied these techniques. So I'm happy that that means it will be useful this, and also for those that didn't know about that. I think anyone that is working or will work on nature conservation and spatial applications before or later will need to deal with this because it's becoming really common.
Good. So the message is there. That's the good news of the report.
Exactly. So Borja was quite clear in his presentation. And actually, I have a short question for Borja before we leave for coffee. Can you just shortly mention how hard would it be to, for example, if someone isn't a completely an expert in botany or phytosociology or anything related, but wants to do something like habitat mapping and uses whatever his or her own classification is. How hard would it be to translate that type of information into, for example, UNIS classification?
Not difficult. It depends of the original information you collect, but I mean, in any case, also for people that maybe is not very familiar, it should be very important to make some kind of training. Like imagine one expert say, okay, you are not very good in the field, but at least please identify the dominant species, this other, so with some rules or some descriptions that can be, if you go a smaller scale, it's better because you maybe only have 25 or let's say 4 types of forests, for example, or 5. So you can just train people how to identify these kind of forests that you have in your region with very basic rules. And also for people can use, we are developing now in our region a tool that you can identify the dominant plants with PlantNet, for example, these, tools. And then the species that you see in the landscape, you put in this application, and it gives you the habitat type that most likely is there, okay? So these kind of things, but some guiding and some training, I think is necessary, but it is also possible to train people and to make it relatively okay for a regional scale, I mean, with some, even if these people is not super, super botanist. But it is important that they are guided and they are trained by someone who really knows who is looking for. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. As far as I can see, there are no other questions. So because we went over the time a little bit, I propose a 9-minute coffee break and we meet again at 12:05 here. Okay? So see you all
Maya.
soon.
See
See
you.
you soon.
Bye. Hello, Borja will join in 30 seconds and we continue.
Yes, no worries.
Go ahead, Borja, no, if you want. Or Maya, what do you think? We start?
Yeah, I think we can start so we don't lose
Okay.
time too much.
Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you. So the next one is part 3. I have to share first. Okay. Can you see it? Yeah. Okay. Hello again. Now we are going to the third part. We will start introducing the sampling schemes for data collection, and I will mostly present an example of how we did in Turkey a few years ago when we had to start from scratch. So this would be the worst case. But I think it's also useful to understand how you should think on a sampling scheme. Of course, you need to accommodate to your study system or the data you have, but the principle will be basically the same. So what we are talking about is predictive vegetation modeling. So we have mentioned that we need data points from the field from high spatial accuracy. We need to assign these points to a specific habitat type. In this case, in most cases now in Europe, using habitat classification of UNIS. And then we need to make models with that. And it is important, I think, to refresh what we are doing and what is the main methodological principle. And this predictive distribution modeling is nothing new. Jose talked about that. There are many books and many tools that basically have focused on species distribution models and whatever. The framework is basically the same. The main difference is, of course, that we are using habitat typologies instead of species. And the second and most important is that we are very much into high scale resolution models. So that means that we need a much higher spatial precision that is typically used for species distribution modeling. And the main principle to understand all of this is that we need to compile spatial data that is our in-situ data. So you have there on the left, the field records. You have like white and black dots that represent occurrence data, presences and absences. And we use a statistical model to develop a map of probability, not of a species, but of habitats, but the principle is exactly the same. Or this is another example from this book by Janet Franklin, and the framework is exactly the same. You have, instead of species occurrence data on the left, you have habitat occurrence data. You use these points for calibration within a specific modeling framework. There could be different options, but all modeling frameworks are statistically based on regressive models or regression-based models, including machine learning and similar tools. And you make this combining the occurrence data with the environmental data. Another difference is that here we have remote sensing data that we use for fitting the models. And at the end, you can validate, and at the end, you have a map of occurrences. We will show you examples later. And so the main question is, where should I get the occurrence data? And you have two options. The first one is, the sign is not well written. Anyway, this is the one we are going, is the design your own field sampling. the best thing is that you have control on your data. The main limitation is time and money and effort. I mean, many times you cannot go and sampling everything in your country. You need to specify exactly and to optimize the time, because otherwise it will be time consuming. But you can also use in existing databases. Now for our task is not that good because it's difficult to find accurate databases, but in some cases, like if you have relatively good vegetation maps from your study area that were done a few years ago, or habitat maps, you have some polygons from which you can extract some data. So this is also possible, but we will focus on the field sampling thing. And so for field sampling, there are basically two main options. One is a well-designed or systematic sampling. Here that you see in this picture is a map of alpine grasslands in the Cantabrian Mountains in the calcareous massif. Okay, so the green areas represent alpine pastures or alpine grasslands, and the red dots are GPS points of data collection. You see on the right is what we call a purposive. So it's kind of biased sampling. This is a sampling that was done for botanists many years ago, and they wanted to characterize the alpine grasslands in the region. So you see these clusters of red dots. They are just representing the pathways that these people made in the mountain. So they just approach 2 or 3 areas and they collected some data points. But the problem is that they are not representative. So what you would like to have is a good representation of your study system. If you are going for these alpine grasslands, so you should create a systematic sampling, maybe not as good as this one, but at least to have a good representation in the space. Okay, so that's why the systematic or stratified or regular sampling is necessary. I already mentioned this. We are talking that if we want to do it properly, the optimal thing would be to collect in the field GPS points that are ground truth data that you can then link to remote sensing data. And this is the general framework we already mentioned today. So the main point is that with these points, if you link to remote sensing and LiDAR, you will be able to have a very precise map of the realized area of occupancy. And I will present a case study. That's how we did that in Central Anatolia in Turkey. It was a project for integrating the methodology of Natura 2000 description in Turkey. And what they needed, it was a first habitat map that they didn't have. And we used Central Anatolia as a study area for developing from scratch a sampling design that could be useful for habitat mapping. And so what was the first step, as I mentioned before? The first is that you need to create your own list or reference or checklist of habitat types for your region. So in this case, we created, because they were not available in Europe, a list of UNIS types that you see in blue. And they are like different steppes. Steppes, kind of grasslands that are unique for Central Anatolia, like alpine calcareous steppes or whatever. And we created this list using UNIS previous classification for Europe, but maybe not a level 3, but this would be like more level 4 for your region. And for correcting or describing these units, you can make use of the botanical descriptions, like you see here on the right, on green. These are like phytosociological alliances that were described in the region, and we used to link to the specific habitat types. So you need to create your own list, and if you have the UNIS habitat typologies from Europe, kind of level 3, you should like update the list for your specific region. to describe with better detail exactly how to differentiate, because it could be always is a bit more precise than if you use the European descriptions. And once you have this, then you need to think, okay, where should I go? How can go to the field? And this is the case of Central Anatolia. And this is also a very intense agricultural region, like could be Serbia or Vojvodina. So what we did is to focalize the sampling efforts on natural and semi-natural areas. And for that, we used Corin land cover polygons from the previous version of 2012. So on the left, you see in different colors the land cover units that you can extract from Corin land cover, like water, salt marshes, natural grasslands in yellow, transitional woodlands, and sclerophyllus forest and broadleaf forest. So you see that in general there is a dominance of grasslands and woodlands in the area. And everything that you don't see colored, that you see just in gray, they are like urban areas and mostly agricultural areas. So we did that to make a first layer to focalize, because we are interested in natural or semi-natural areas. So we used this to design the sampling efforts, just to concentrate the field work on the areas which are where natural habitats are more abundant. If you are using Corin land cover, you may find some problems for a specific unit that is called agricultural pastures. Is the one you have on the right. The problem with this is that originally it's part of the agricultural land cover polygons, but in practice is kind of semi-natural, because normally they are pastures, and this is quite common also in Spain. I'm not sure, probably not that in Serbia, but in some cases you should use this as well. So we included this as part of the natural and semi-natural areas but in any case, we focalized our efforts on the natural habitats. So how we did that? We first did a field training. It's something similar we're going to do for this SONATA project in next spring. And so we met with the field experts and we agreed on the habitat typologies that we were going to map. And we also developed a kind of tablet system, a practical app from which everyone could automatically assign a point in the field. Now we have like other solutions like QField, which is a app solution from QGIS, which is free, and so we don't need to develop that, but at that time it was necessary. And here in the lower part of the screen, you can see exactly how we did that. So there were groups of 2 people in the field, and they were responsible of each one of the main regions of Central Anatolia, and they made transects, what we call here systematic field surveys. So you see in this kind of dashed white line, you see what was the itinerary that these people made. And the idea was it was a car driving transect, okay? So these guys were driving along trying to maximize the roads to cross natural areas. And from time to time, they stopped and they collected GPS points. And additionally, we also allowed to collect what we call map points, which means that you can be in the field, you can recognize a habitat type that maybe you cannot reach because it's like in a hill or a mountain that there is not a road, but you can identify in the tablet, in the aerial photo, if you have it in Google Earth or whatever, and you can put a point. So this is possible as well, and it maximizes your field sampling. So this was done during 2 seasons. So the sampling design was just to cover all the region as well as possible, and to ask people to to cross and to collect field points. It is important to notice that the GPS points should be separated in the field. So a minimum distance of around 500 meters or more, just to prevent spatial autocorrelation in the models. And once you collect this data, I mean, this is like basic way. There could be alternatives to this sampling, but the main point that at the end you need to collect field locations, and you need to maximize the spatial representation, and also, of course, you need to cover all the habitat types from your region, at least the habitat types that you know that can be mapped, because there could be other habitat maps that are difficult to map because they have not enough cover. And with these points, we collected around 35,000 points with GPS, with around 5 meters of accuracy, probably 5 to 10 meters, because it was based on GPS, standard GPS, and together with climatic and satellite remote sensing based variables, you can use different algorithms. In this case, was based on standard R packages for distribution modeling. And at the end, what we have is a model. We have a distribution model for each one of the habitat types. For example, here is a model of the probability of occurrence of Central Anatolian volcanic steppes. So this would include Cappadocia area if you know the region. So the red colors represent the higher probability to find this kind of, and this is made with an accuracy of around 100 meters, could be even higher. So this is the main point, that if you collect good points and the points are representing the study area and the habitat types, you could, I mean, the best your field sampling, the best the models that you will get in the end. And just as another example, with more, let's say, with a better background data, is what we are doing in northern Spain. Here you see in northwest, this is our study area. This is what is called the Cantabrian Mixed Forest Ecoregion, is one WBF ecoregion, and it represents the Atlantic area, non-Mediterranean area of the Iberian Peninsula. And in this case, what we have is a good database of vegetation plots, around 28,000 vegetation plots, that they are not well georeferenced. They are like the same information that you can find from EVA database at the level of Europe. Actually, this data is also part of EVA. And so here, what we did, our first step was to develop the reference list or the checklist of UNIS habitats. And for that, we have 3 steps. For example, if we are going to UNIS level, and this is important because this is something that you could do, for example, in Serbia for developing the checklist of habitat types, if you are using EVA data or any other vegetation database. And so this is just to define the habitat units, okay? And so the first thing that we did is to keep the assignments of EVA data to UNIS level 2. That means broadleaf forest and deciduous forest and so on. And we did that because the expert algorithm from EVA, we found that the level 3, it's a bit problematic. It was not able to identify all plots. So we preferred to start the level 2. And then within this level 2, what we did is to make a numerical classification. Okay, this is something that you can do only if you really have some staff that can do this kind of thing, but it's just an example that how we did get with a numerical classification, how we went beyond the UNIS level 3, okay? So I don't want to spend much time on this, but what we had at the end, which is the main point here, is that, for example, for habitat types, we defined at the regional level 22 forest habitats. And if you see on the left, you see that we kept exactly the same typology that is used in UNIS level 3, but then we regionalized. That means that we described the UNIS types that we have in our study region. So some of these units that you see here, we adapted to our region to have a much better description. Because if you stop in the level 3 of UNIS, it is good for all Europe, it's homogeneous, but then you need a bit more information. And why is this necessary? Because if you have this well described, then the field work will be optimized because you will based on the specific species composition or descriptions of your habitats in your region, okay? So at the end, what we have is a field sampling that can be yearly based. That means that every year we are collecting more data to improve the models with GPS accuracy. You can also get it from local vegetation maps if you have them, if they are a good accuracy. But any data you collect, the main point is that you need to link to standard typologies based on UNIS habitats, okay? And then there are other ways to filter the data. It's something that Jose will show you later. And once you have all this data, then technically you need to compute some process to finally collect the occurrence data that you will use for modeling. And so this is all for this. Again, we can make a round of questions and the questionnaire of this system, and I'm stopping sharing now.
Thank you, Borja. We had a question in the chat, and I see that Jose has answered it already. Do you want to comment a little bit on it, Jose?
No, yeah, let's proceed to discuss on this. So, Borja, if you read the question, that it's a logical question. If we can identify something with remote sensing, for example, urban areas, burnt area, do we have to go to the field? The answer is, of course, not. Once technology fills one gap, but with knowledge, not with speculative assessments, of course, we jump into the technological side of the thing. So is much more accurate identify a fire with a drone flight or with very high resolution satellite in that location that go into the field and create a perimeter of the fire. Of course, that technology is now here and we have to use. But as Borja explained before, how to identify a beech forest with or without the accompanying plants of acid soils or not. So we can do it. We are in the way of doing that. But for the moment, we need. Sorry, Borja, proceed. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and actually I didn't mention, but we discussed this when we were in Novi Sad. Yeah, absolutely, if you are confident and you know, I know this region, I have been there and identified, and now with the aerial photo in my office, I can identify more. I mean, the same habitat, you can produce more points, and we actually do it. I mean, as far as you are confident that these points represent the habitats, absolutely. It's not only possible, I think in many cases it's also necessary. But of course, the person doing that needs to be sure that the locations are okay, because otherwise you will produce noise.
When we started working together and Borja assisted us and the team of botanists and Borja assisted us in Cantabria, we started working with the maps, with the local vegetation maps that we had in Cantabria. And after the assessment of the botanists, we identified, I cannot remember the number, so the percentage, but it was over 75% of the area in two different moments were different. So 75% of the area that we have for use as in-situ information was different. One time was oak forest in the same patch with a different perimeter made by another field worker. 10 years later was oak forest and then beech forest. And of course, when grasslands is something that you cannot identify from the air in the Earth photo. For the grasslands was a nightmare, complete nightmare. Over 75% of the maps were different in 10 years different in time. And one step beyond, we have been working with the people from Catalonia. They have a very good information on UNIS, habitat types, every 10 years for Nature 2000 purposes. And they identified that 30% of the area changed in that 10 years time span. It's impossible to change 30% of the year of the area changing in 10 years. So for that 30% of the area, around 80% was uncertainty in the maps. It was not real change, it was uncertainty. So because of that question, it's a very good question. If you are sure, go for it. But if you are not sure, let's think of that. Otherwise, we will increase the uncertainty of our outcomes.
Thank you, Jose, and thank you, Borja. If there are any other questions, please go ahead. And in the meantime, I'm sharing the third Menti link for you all. So, and I'll share my screen.
Jose, I think now we can go directly to the data refining section, so we can avoid that's a small practice, so we can save time.
And if you want,
as you want. I mean,
no, I don't mind. If you have something to tell, just proceed for sure.
No, I mean that you can go after this survey directly to the next section.
Okay, perfect.
Number 4. Yeah, I think for
very
also
diverse answers here.
Yeah, but also from the comments, I guess that in biosense you have in general expertise in doing similar things, mostly in agricultural areas or maybe for other purposes, not really like very specific habitat maps probably.
That's true, but also today here we have people that are not from Biosense, students and researchers from other institutions as well. So I guess different levels account for different answers.
Okay, so they are more in the blue group.
Yeah,
the first one. Yeah, it should be more green.
And this is the next question.
That's so beautiful to see the blue color rising here. This opens the room for the next discussion that we will spend like the next 20 minutes talking on this. And as we talked in the beginning, and also because Lori is here from Vito, we suggested having another workshop in the middle of for strengthening a little bit more this knowledge on robust in-situ data curation before running the beautiful modeling with cloud computing, OpenEO, whatever. So to do a maximum effort in the middle of field experts and technological experts to align. And so what I will try to do in the next minutes is only to highlight the need of data curation. You can proceed from scratch, that's good. If you have millions of data, the Gaussian distribution of biological information will always focus to the average things. So that's good. You can put garbage if you have very good quality data in a large amount. But if the data is scarce or is collected with a limitation, is necessary a data correction. So Borja, do you have something to do in practical terms, or we proceed with the next?
No, let's go with section 4, I think.
Okay. Okay, can you see the screen? Okay, so this part is just trying to focus on the need of data. We are now writing a paper with this Turkey to try to conceptualize, will be like the backbone of the whole big picture of Sonata workflow or whatever. But we are trying to put names on things. So we are talking about data curation that has different steps. That will be the focus on that next workshop in the middle of modeling and in-situ data collection, but just to open the discussion now. So we are talking about how managing that in-situ data before running final habitat maps into like creating two concepts. First is the curation of the field data, in-situ data itself, how to refine that points. And then once we have the points, some previous steps before running the models of habitat types. And I will try to highlight in some slides with maps and colors. It's easy to blah, blah. So the question is that, okay, thanks to Borja for the beautiful explanation on UNIS. We know that from our view, that first question on the Menti was, what would you do first when you have to undertake a vegetation mapping task? So from my view, after many years spending time with this, is okay, please understand what are you looking for. We made a master with a master student. The team made a very good job with the master thesis, and that worked with us here in the group of Borja. She was talking about the grassland habitat types of Nardus and Festuca. So it's very specific habitat type that, from my view, is the same. When I go to the field, I cannot manage. So in the orthophoto is the same, but at the end, the information, of course, is that we have two different habitat types. So the first thing that Gerard did was to go to the field with one of the botanists of the group and read whatever that was available on the two habitat types. So first, classification system need to be understood, and you have to go to the field I mean, you have to know what you're talking about. Then you collect information following that classification scheme. So you go to the field, collect the information, you exploit all the maps that you have at hand, you do the best thing that's possible, and at the end you have points, and you have your time series of satellite imagery, you're running Google Earth Engine, you run as the Vito team will explain in the next workshop, that beautiful approaches for modeling. But it's done. Once I have my in-situ data, it's done. Let's move to modeling or not. So the blue color in the last Menti was clear that no, we should do something more. Is to refine, to make that data curation. And that data curation, what allows is to break this wall that Borja shows before. So we have not a differentiation between the in-situ data collection, expert knowledge, and the remote sensing modeling and so on. We need to put both together. We need to sum up efforts because we have the same objectives. Is observe and extrapolate. That's our objective. We need to know what do we have looking from our window, and then we need to extrapolate that observation to the whole territory by keeping or reducing uncertainties when we extrapolate. All of us know what means to extrapolate, is to predict in areas not observed before. Okay, so what we need, again and again and again, I will have that word of in-situ occurrence data. We have the in-situ observations. The botanists go to the field, they look to the species, they understand and interpret the territory, and they give us sampling observations. So they sample populations, they sample the ecosystems. They are not painting anymore on the screen 1,000 hectares and then again the next province, the next region, because as occurs in Spain with Nature 2000, after 30 years of Nature 2000, some regions continue looking to the other photos and writing maps and drawing maps. No? But it's not enough to have one drone there flying, because we need coupling. We need to couple that in-situ information with our predictors. This is the let's say, what we call data curation. We need to align what the experts are telling the field and what data is telling us on the computer, because they need to talk the same language. We need to break this wall, okay? So the in-situ information, the local information, the reference data, even though the experts give us a coordinate behind 0.1 meters of accuracy, and they took a picture of the forest, and they took a picture of the understory, and they use the SE system that Borja explained. So even though that point is 100% sure in the nature, it cannot be 100% sure in the digital nature we have in our screen with satellite imagery and LiDAR and so on. So we need to couple our LiDAR information, our remote sensing, time series, and so on, need to be together with the information that are providing us the predictors. So I use this slide that I use for many things. In the left side, we are not going to fail. We have forest, satellite will find forest, LiDAR will find forest. If we are crazy and use radar, sorry for the crazy, because with radar I spend a lot of time in my life almost for nothing because it's quite difficult to interpret. But we are not going to fail. We have forest. But what happens on the right side? Maybe you have a point from the botany, but it's a mosaic, very heterogeneous of different species, different land use types that transform the habitat types in different ecological status stands. So come on, that's very complex. We have to take care. And that applies to any kind of predictors, okay? So we made in the north of Spain for running that habitat types, we created our own soil maps, okay? So we divide the territory the same way that Borja explained. We stratify the territory because of lithological units. We run PCA analysis with a lot of information about remote sensing and whatever for identifying areas that behave homogeneously in terms of land cover, in terms of vegetation productivity, soil humidity during the whole year. So we had homogeneous areas in terms of environmental multidimensionality. We have lithological information, and we identified the perfect sampling with the money that we had. We had money for 100 points on the field. So we collected 100 points. We had money for anything else because then we had to go to the lab and so on. But we did our best. And we had at the same time, think on the botanists in cars, 3 botanists that I cannot remember Borja now, but we spent like 50,000 euro around in botanists, paying salaries for going to the field and collect GPS information of habitat types. And meanwhile, we work for the people who was Wageningen, creating these kind of maps. And for example, this is a map of soil pH. We were happy. For soil organic matter, we have to run mechanistic model. We have a map similar to this about soil organic matter content of the topsoil and so on. So we were happy with this map, and we were happy with the botanist. But what happened when we put together the information? We found, I checked yesterday the inconsistencies. 20% of the points of the botanist, what means around 10,000 euro, were inconsistent with the soil map, because we found things that had no sense in the beginning. Then you have in the middle the quaternary processes, eliminating anything that has to do with soil lithology in soil pH disappears completely because of quaternary processes and soil erosion and so on. But you have to keep in mind that if you put soil grids on here, the capability of explaining something is zero, absolutely zero, because the region is small. The quaternary processes are so intensive. So nothing to do with soil grids information and the distribution of habitat types in this region. So that's what I mean, that one thing is is the field information, the locations and the habitat type that we found there and so on. And another thing is what the predictors are telling us. And predictors about topography, about climate, about soil, and come on, remote sensing, of course. So we have time series of satellite imagery, Landsat. Since middle 80s, we collected all the time series, of course. And we have our own proxies in C++, for it's like Google Earth Engine, but all the satellite imageries of the region are downloaded. Clouds and shadows are masked manually by an operator. We create the maximum value composite by using different techniques. So we Sabisky-Godai and other statistical techniques to curate the time series of satellite imagery. So we put an effort now, of course, as everybody. We are running Google Earth Engine. We will learn by Vito using OpenEO. So at the end, we have different products of remote sensing. that we spend a lot of time, very difficult to curate, to prepare. But this, again, as occurred with the soil information, let's put over this information our in-situ data from the botanists. Botanists, we enjoyed quite a lot with the botanists because if you remember, Roja, I remember perfectly when we started talking with them about we're going to create maps with remote sensing, they started to laugh. They didn't know anything about remote sensing and spatial modeling, and they told, "Come on, this is not going to work." Okay, so they were like the enemy. It's good having the enemy. I mean, the enemy is good having something that is not thinking like you for criticizing your work, but of course they are friends, so they want to collaborate. This is the way we want to collaborate in Sonata with the Vito capabilities, for doing our best job for the Sonata mapping and so on. So what we did a job trying to understand what occurred with the spectrophenological curves with the land surface reflectance, LSP, against our in-situ data collected points. That points that you find here in the map are the best points we have from Cantabria. In Cantabria, we have around 20,000 points that we use with the people of Vito and Europa Bon, and we determine that almost 90% of the points are not good enough for running this kind of high resolution analysis with 10 meters sentinel and so on. So these are around 200 points that are good, are GPS located, good enough. So we identified for different habitat types the spectrophenological curves using Landsat, using Sentinel, with that curves that we have managed with expert care with our own protocol in C++. This started before having Google Earth Engine routines and this cloud computing technology available for everybody. But well, it's good now because we have now we have a TFM, another master student that is creating curves with Google Earth Engine using the same algorithms, or more or less the same algorithms that we created in C++, and we're going to compare how things behave. But well, let's continue talking on in-situ data briefly. I'm going to finish soon. So each point has a curve, and with the curves we calculated some metrics, some spectrophenological metrics: the start of season for the tree leaves and then the forest, end of season, the maximum peaks, the amplitude, and so on. So with that metrics, we know, because our points are really good. I mean, are really good. That's what Borja told. We went to the field. We paid to the botanists. They are experts. We afterwards criticized that points with a lot of with different information, and that curves define this kind of spectrophenological behavior of each of our habitat types. We published in Spanish a paper because we want to reach the ministry. This was one of the reasons, many reasons, that we engage quite good now with the Ministry of Spain on this, and we work with them in different aspects. So with that curves, what we can do is to identify some metrics, some curves that are related 100% here with some habitat types or some habitat disturbances and some habitat conditions. And so that curves we can identify, if that point is a beech forest, we don't need to identify that that's a beech forest. We know it's a beech forest, but we use that information, that in-situ a priori information, for work to identify the curves of the beech forest, the curve of the beech forest after disturbance, the curve of the beech forest with no age structure, with the canopy height, whatever. So we are now working on that. That's one of the Biodiversa Plus projects we have also in the group to increase our knowledge on this, with the objective of supporting the improvement of further modeling following operational manners. So our main interest is to identify these gaps of knowledge to cast light to further modeling capabilities as the one that we'll have here with the Vito colleagues. So imagine here, this kind of habitats, look to these curves, are highly different. One grassland is a grassland that is managed, so the biomass increase in summer because we are training that, we are managing that grassland to have biomass in summer, and the other grassland is a natural grassland in the alpine areas that has almost no phenological differences. So we use these functional traits of the habitat types and these structural differences and these the properties of the ecosystem to allow us to know that that point is correctly located in terms of the spectrophenological response in terms of the remote sensing, in the same way that we criticize how the soil pH can or cannot be used for mapping habitat types by putting together the in-situ information and the soil pH. So we have that metrics and so on. Once we do that is when we are more secure for running our basic modeling approach that is, like Borja explained, like the species distribution modeling, occurrence data plus predictors, but with a very important thing in the middle is that we analyze the compromise of these two words, in situ plus predictors. Then we run the models, we post-process, and so on. One other thing that is very important and we will apply in Sonata is just not related with how in situ information interact with the predictors, is how managing our predictions. It's what we call the hierarchical approach that I'm not going to spend time, but before running habitat types, we define like a previous scheme that let's go to do something easier. Let's go to predict the formation. So let's go to predict the higher levels, as Borja told with units. Let's start by the level 1 of units and then move to the level 2 and then move to the level 3. That's what we call the hierarchical approach. And that's very important to do, not just because we need to it's a way of improving our accuracies, the reliability of our assessments, but also it's very important because when using remote sensing, we have a lot of information there. Just to put the keyword of Copernicus, we have a lot of layers there flying in the Copernicus portfolio that are talking about something very similar that we want to create. We have layers about riparian areas, protected areas, imperviousness, forest type. We have corticorin and cover. We have the CLC plus, and we have to take care that our predictions align with something that already exists. So let's move to the same language that's something that already exists, and we are talking about very simple classification scheme. Before running analysis for mapping forest types, come on, let's map forests itself. It's very easy to map forest. It's much easier to map a forest as a formation than to map different forest types. So we started playing with this also in the north of Spain, creating a very accurate with 100% 98% of accuracy of forest, of land cover formations of vegetation formations in this region. So we mapped a simplified region of forest, coniferous forest, deciduous forest, shrubland, grasslands, managed or not, of in the area. And afterwards, by respecting or by taking into account where are the forests, only within the boundaries of the forest, we map the different forest types. So instead of modeling directly the habitat types, we model that hierarchy of the units levels for going steadily into more complex systems. Once we have that map, as I talked before, we have to validate again our results. But the validation is very complex. So this is a detail of an area on which we have here a delineation of the different patches, different forest patches, and that looks like a forest. We can map this easily. Let's identify the forest. Then we move to the different forest type with the genus Betula, Quercus, Ilex. When they are validated, what we are going to assure is that all of them, even though the complexity is high, we are moving always within the forest domain. I mean, we are never going to model a forest type in an area that was mapped previously as a shrubland. Okay, that's the hierarchical classification approach. And then just to put on the table the practical thing, that's what Borja explained with the example of Turkey. As Borja explained, that we started from scratch and we finally ended up with this kind of maps. This is the map of the habitat distribution or the different habitat types in Turkey. And then we applied the Marchand systematic classification, STP, systematic conservation planning approaches with Marchand for identifying the Nature 2000 sites. So what I did is to create, you will have access, everybody will have access. I am going to end up with the presentation. And what I did was to create one folder. Sorry, I'm going to open here. I created one example to work that is very simple GIS database of what we did in Turkey. Okay, if you open the GIS, okay, this is the area on
I
which
don't
we
think
work.
we can see your screen right now.
Yeah,
We
sorry,
can only
I was
see
in
the
not in the good
yeah.
screen. Yeah.
Yeah, now it's fine.
Now it's
Thanks.
okay. Yeah. So what I did, you will have access to this in the folder that it's called practice. You will have this hands-on part 3 and 4. What Borja explained, we created a very simplified GIS with field information, with the study area and the target for natural areas, as Borja explained, with field information and the mapping results of that job. So more or less is this. So what we have here, I use ArcMap, sorry, with GIS Pro, QGIS, or any GIS that you manage or R. This is the study area that we had in Turkey. Okay, so in that area we had. Let me move to the target. Okay. Oops, I thought I had the target, so the natural areas, I had them. Well, I review anyway. So in this area, we can make a zoom. These are two small locations on which we have points. So these points that you can see here are all the points collected in the area when the botanist went to the field. Okay, so this point has a lot of noise with them. So what we did first was to eliminate all the points that has some kind of noise in terms of predictors. So that will appear in red color. There's a large amount of points still. Then we reduce autocorrelation issues. We eliminate autocorrelation. We eliminate information that was not reliable in terms of the previous analysis that we did for each of the classes that we were sampling. So we reduced quite a lot the number of points. And finally, for different habitat types, we had some points that were curated, that were filtered, and we run models with all these point databases, with all the points after reducing the noise from predictors, points after reducing autocorrelation issues, and we assure that the spatial pattern of the maps were similar. And the good news is that by using just a few amount of points, look to this area, I'm going to open, as Borja showed before, the list of habitat types that we have here. Excel wants to open. And I'm finishing already. Okay, this is the list of habitat types. Okay. These types are organized by formations, by classification following the IUCN criteria, in salt marshes, shrublands, deciduous forest, coniferous forest, and then in the UNIS habitat types. By using the points after being filtered, we arrive to something like this. We arrive to something, a map that is around with an accuracy of 94% around by validating the map that identify where are the the broadleaf forest in green, coniferous forest in pink or in purple color, shrubland juniperos, shrubland communities in orange, steep areas, grasslands in yellow. And look that we have no calibration points at all in this area. I will put in big color. I'm going to Juniper zoom to layer. So we have points in this area, the big one. We have no points in this area. This is an extrapolation. And the good news, after the sampling correctly defined, after the curation of in situ data, and being sure that when eliminating the information that is like it's an over information, overfitting the models and so on, the final results are this. And even in areas that have no in situ training, the result was accurate. So we mostly provide this database because this will be the focus of the next workshop. We will go step by step, demonstrating how is the shape of the original data, is this one. So we will check which amount of, or which habitat types from this list do we have. So all these lists, this list is represented in the green dot field calibration information. We refine by eliminating the noise from predictors, spatial autocorrelation. We make different rounds of modeling to identify the most informative habitat types. We applied statistical criteria as the Cook distance, leverage approaches for identifying which habitat type is useful and which habitat type is not useful. And after running this kind of curation or refining process, we run the models again. And we see that the spatial pattern is the same, the spatial accuracy improves, and we are also able to identify habitat types, complex habitat types within the area that the model was trained in this area, but also outside of the area on which the model was trained. So what does it mean? It means that the data curation, data refinement works. We need not such amount of people because Borja told that we collected 30,000 points for the study area. No, we collected 200,000 points and we ended up with 30,000 points. So we lost 500,000 points in the middle that was not lost, was refined to collecting only the most informative data for getting at the end maps that reach at the regional scale 94% of accuracy, objectively demonstrated. I mean, we are not only keeping 100 points, so then the accuracy is high because we have just a few points in very easy areas to be mapped. We are keeping 35,000 points, and the spatial accuracy is around 94%. So that was the idea. We provide you the database for allowing the people to touch, to download, to see, to open in a GIS, to do whatever. And we will spend two more hours in the next workshop to go step by step on this to finally reach to the final data refined. And that data, to the people, the colleagues of Beaton, whatever, that's the idea of providing that data, filter, refine for a start running with less uncertainty, the modeling procedure with that beautiful tools of spatial capability of modeling. And that was the idea.
Thank you. Before Maya start, I just want to say I'm really happy that we decided to have the separate session for this last part because it was really valuable to hear everything. It helpful and we're gonna use it. Hopefully that the audience also had a nice teaching class and this last part I believe it's important to practice all this. And Borja, thank you for finally explaining me how to use Eunice classes on web because I was using it, but now I'm just it's a bit more clear for me. Though we do have botanists who are experts, but still ecologists are not that into it. So yeah.
So that was the idea of this workshop, but what Borja explained. This is only a way of opening the mind to understand that even though what Borja explained is the first mandatory step, and the data can be 100% accurate in terms of the botany point of view, then we need to couple with our predictors. Otherwise, we are making a crazy model. Because if both worlds with the wall are not talking the same language, we are just telling to the model, okay, this is a forest. And the model says, okay, but LiDAR is 0 meters of canopy height. yeah, but I know it's forest because the botanists were in the field. But yeah, come on, but I am LiDAR. I am telling that canopy height is 0 meters. So that has no sense. That's the idea. We will go steadily into that in the next workshop.
Can I also ask something now? Yeah, first of all, yeah, indeed, Jose and Borja, thank you very much for this is a really nice overview, actually. Also, because we're talking about the habitat mapping workflow, but this is also definitely part of the whole workflow, starting really from the beginning. So thanks for that. I was just small thing about what you said, Jose, about that you checked the spectros phenological curves of these habitat classes. I was just wondering what you meant exactly. Were you looking at all these points and then checking if they're these phenological metrics that you derive, for example, duration of the season, length of the season, etc., if there were no outliers for these habitat classes? And also something else, it's a bit similar, but that you said we should look at refining or training data with also the maps, the predictors that we kind of use. So how does that go in practice? Because do you filter then on maybe also points that don't make sense? Because normally, for example, we were talking about that beech forest that can occur on acid and non-acid soils. If you know, like there, it should occur on an acid soil, but we found or we classified them as beech on non-acid soil. Did you kick it out, or what do you mean exactly?
Yeah, the first question are very it's going into the mood. You know, that's the good thing. So first, by using the spectrophenological curves, what we try to do is imagine that you have no time series of satellite imagery and you have an NDVI of July in Spain. Is where the forests are with the maximum greenness. So imagine that what you do is to take all your points that you have confidence of that points. We are avoiding the points that we have like a label of in the in-situ information from 1 to 9. So if the point is 1, accuracy is 100%. So the botany went to the field and it put a coordinate, so we have 100% confidence. When the point is 9, it comes from a vegetation map. Maybe it's good, maybe not, whatever. So we locate the point. We have some kind of crosswalk to transform the vectorial vegetation maps into points. We have like some GIS, very easy to understand in GIS terms, but different steps for locating a point from a map. Okay, imagine that you have, as we have 25,000 points of the area. So you take only the ones with confidence, 200-300 points, GPS points, and so on. And you take the average value of NDVI, and you create a box plot. That's very easy to understand that forest has higher NDVI in July, then upland, then grassland, then bare ground and rock areas, and negative values in water-related ecosystems. So we do the same, but with the metrics, not just the average NDVI of one moment. We try to understand whether some point is outside of the boundary. You can label a point like outside of my database manually. That's good. Or you can create some statistics as the Cook distance, the leverage indicators that are talking about a statistical distance that can be significantly identified that you are outside of my database. And instead of doing that only with one indicator, average NDVI, you do with different metrics. And the good thing is to do it with time series analysis and try to do your best with that information. But to do your best, the curve needs to be accurate. And you have a lot of gaps in the middle, in between. So you have to do mosaics, monthly mosaics or whatever. So that's something that need to be, what we want to do now is to identify some metrics of that curves that allow to identify the habitat in good condition, in good conservation status, and then which kind of metrics for the curves allow to identify that the habitat has a specific, let's say, disturbance that affect the structure or the function of that ecosystem. So imagine in Spain, we have Corpus Pyrenaica forest that can be in good status of conservation because different tree age, different canopy structure, understory. But when you have a fire, and the recovery after fire is because of sprouting, all the trees have the same altitude, the same age. So that's a disturbance because of the recovery. It's a soil fertility depletion and so on. So both are Quercus pyrenaica, but in different conditions. And the curves identify very accurately which kind of stand do you have. So that's a way of advancing. So how to apply that to the in-situ information? At least to know which points correspond to an habitat with a good conservation status and which points decrease that conservation status because of different reasons. As everybody that works in remote sensing knows that the ET members need to be pure ET members. We cannot collect regions of interest for training remote sensing with a mix of categories. That's not an ET member. That the spectral mixing is almost zero, so you have problems with the classification. This is the same. It's to a purification of the in-situ information for allowing the further model exercise more accurate and reliable. That's the idea. And the second question, I cannot remember.
Oh, but can I add to this because just
Yeah.
to, and then you can, Laurie, you can please repeat. So when you were talking about the differences and what happened if we have these accurate points for example, wet meadows here that were not met in the last few years, and now on we are in this phase that we need to decide for which year we're gonna go within Sonata for habitat type modeling. Still, for one side, you're gonna collect the data, and for certain areas, you are quite sure what there is. But then the environment changed, and like how to handle this? Like, do you use different do you use layers, remote sensing layers from different years and then try to work a bit with that, or how we could handle it? This is a question for both for you and Laurie and like everyone.
Briefly, the perfect environment, the perfect working environment is to have the point in-situ information from 1 year and the predictors for the same year, the same season, the same moment. That's not easy. So what we do is to use the remote sensing, the time series, to assure that one point collected, imagine in 2022, if you are going to model with layers of 2020, because your LiDAR of the remote sensing is a time series, you assure first, that's the data curation, that your in-situ information is not changing on time. Because imagine that you have a fire, and in the next year that this forest was burned or was fired. You cannot feed the model with the time series of satellite imagery if that point was fired in the next year, because the model, you are putting one point of a beech forest, imagine, with an NDVI of satellite imagery that is telling you, so NDVI 0, because all the biomass was extracted for that point. So you need to have consistency in all the time series of predictors, of course, including remote sensing, and your in-situ information that is coupled, is combined with that predictor that is not coetaneous. You need to take into account that. And we lose quite a lot of in-situ information because of that, of course. Imagine that also, if you lose information that you keep only, you feed your model with reliable and accurate information, the model understand, okay, a beech forest will be always, will exist in a pixel, always that occur this and this and this and this. Once you have, as imagine, satellite imagery without that conditions, your model is going to identify that you have not there that habitat type. So even though the data is not coetaneous between in-situ data and predictors, you need to do this kind of exercises for identifying which areas which locations are consistent over time. It's mandatory, absolutely. Otherwise, information has not consistency. You need to do that. And we lose a lot of information because of that. I don't know if I was clear. We will go.
Yeah, but it was just the thing that Laurie asked you one more question.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, Laurie, I forgot the second one.
No problem. And we can keep it short. It's just that you said that you try to refine your training points, at least by looking also at the predictors, if it makes sense, at least, right? So I was just wondering, how did you do that in practice? Just if you can give an example on that.
Yeah, very easy. So that's what we call the data refinement. So where we are putting names. I mean, it's very first we eliminate the no data. Imagine that you have no data in the time series of remote sensing. Even though your point is good, you have to eliminate. You have no data, so you cannot in your predictors that you are using. Then spatial autocorrelation issues and that distance, that statistical distances for identifying outliers. So we eliminate also that outliers. We eliminate the points that are nearby others by using some test of more than one test or whatever, a semi-variogram to identify the spatial autocorrelation of the instance of your database. And then it's very easy to think on previous models. Do you know, I mean, somebody use R. We have the COPSEL package in R and others. These kind of packages would do is to run previous models to identify which points match the majority of a particular typology. And you can assess whether one, imagine 100 points, remain to Beach Forest by assessing the average NDVI of July, but that's one variable. But if you run a model and you identify that that model is telling you, okay, these 4 points are outside of everything always, you can eliminate that points also because they are not explanative. It's, at the end is one way of identifying which points are informative or not. And there is a vast literature on that by managing training data. Which points are real absences, which points are pseudo absences. If you use real absences, pseudo absences, presence only data, there is a big war on that. And what we want is to optimize the steps towards data refinement, data refining. And we are putting names on that. Do this first, then do this first, then do the second, this third. So your database at the end would be like the best thing you can do with this initial point database. You also identify biases, you identify data gaps. If you collect all information from lowland areas and not the areas with high altitudes over 1,000 meters, it has no sense to identify that bias. And the solution is you need to collect more data from the upper part. So
Okay,
all
thanks.
that kind of diagnosis, okay? And we will do in SONATA, of course.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Quite a lot of time, so sorry for long explanations. Interesting.
No problem. Do we have any more questions at the moment? I think no. So I will just shortly, before we let everyone go, take you back to the presentation that Diana showed in the beginning to announce the rest of the workshops that we are planning within SONATA. As Jose mentioned already, the next one, in which we will go into the link between data collection and what comes next, or modeling, will be the part 2 of today's workshop. And we are envisioning this one in the first half of February, but we will announce and send the contact information to everyone. Then, after we are done with this data collection and everything is completely ready, we will go on to the next step, which is actual modeling. This workshop will be given by our colleagues from Vito. You saw Laurie Hill. Laurie is one of our SONATA colleagues from Belgium, from Vito. So we'll go into habitat type modeling and spatial modeling in this workshop number 3 in March next year. And then after everyone are finished with field work, we will meet again in September for the workshop that will be given by our colleagues from Norway, from NINA. This one will be about ecosystem services and quantifying those in relation to the planning and implementation of nature-based solutions, which is what SONATA is really all about. And also, we have established social networks for the project. Go ahead and give us a follow and give us a like, because all of the activities, including the workshops, will be broadcasted over there as well. The website is coming as well, and all of the material from the workshops will be available on the website. But until that is until that one is going on, we will share today's material with you via email, probably in the next couple of days. Also, Jose and Borja offered kindly to share their contact information with everyone. So if you have any additional questions or anything, you can contact the two of them as well. And I think this is mostly it regarding today's workshop. From my side, thank you all for being here.
And just small thing, Maya, did you managed to get the screenshot of this workshop because yeah.
I have.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, for spending the previous 3 and almost a half hours with everyone, with us. Thank you to Borja and Jose.
Thank you to our new participants, guests from the other institution as well. Hopefully they will spread the word and more people will join in the following workshops as well. And yeah.
And also, yes, once again, when we share the material from today, we will also send you a link for a short survey to kind of see what you think about what you heard today and how to improve the next one. So please just take a few minutes and answer those few short questions that will be in the survey. Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
guys. Have a good
See
day.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Не знам да не пусти. Како се напушна?
Bye bye.
Ја, ево ка, да.